like to suggest that the board, difficult time of year I know, but the board have the superintendent schedule a tour of Pinkerton at our earliest, everyone's earliest conveniences. We obviously have to coordinate that with, you know, we've had some, how would you describe it, high level? Informal, high level discussions. And I'd like to suggest that we get the ball rolling and take a tour.
So should just send out a meeting?
Well, we, did you have some dates?
They're pretty open. They're pretty open. I mean, they'll do what fits your schedule. And I had indicated that maybe late afternoon for people who are working. We want an evening tour. If you give me some possible times that yours are going to be available, I can go look around.
I'm not opposed to a tour, but I really would rather see some data, because I'm sure when we go there, it's going to look nice, and I'm not saying it's not valuable to go there, but I don't know particulars about population they have, or you know, I don't really have any information. I'd like to, I could research it myself, but and I know we are trying to move ahead quickly, but this was going to be something that I was hoping the assessment committee was going to provide us as a group with some type of packet of information. So I wouldn't mind going, but I would kind of like to have some things in my head when I went and say, well, where is that science lab that we talked about, or you know, some of those, just to be more informed before I go, because I'm sure it's going to be a nice. I've been on the campus; it's a beautiful campus, but I would like to get some information.
I think the idea is that there will be people there that we can ask questions of, and that was really the, I mean, obviously to view the campus, but also ask questions if we have questions.
I guess procedurally, I have to say that too. We conducting a school board meeting, we have a forum, and we talk to those people about course offerings, and we should think about that, because we just went and looked.
I mean, I would think we're going for information, unless we want to do it.
I'm just saying. I think
unless we want to send a subcommittee.
Well, I think
I'll ask for some guidance. You have a little. You're legal.
I don't believe it's an issue. We would post the fact that we're doing it. I don't anticipate, as much as I'm impressed with the campus, those who haven't seen it lately, some of the additions that have taken place in the freshman camp and so forth. As much as I'm impressed with that, I don't believe that the board will deliberate about anything. So I think you're fine. But it would be posted.
But you bring up a good point. I just, that, you know, we would not want to be in any kind of deliberation.
You're not going to vote to it.
no, but I think technically we have to post it, because if I say to Dana, you know, I like this place, and Dana goes, oh, I don't know. I mean, in my book, we're deliberating at that point, because he and I may have to vote later about something that has to do with that. And I'm not trying to be a stickler here, but I think if we post it, and that way, if people want to come witness what we're doing, they can, to see that we're not deliberating or that hear what we're saying. I think we have to make that opportunity.
I think it'll be able to go.
Yeah, please.
And it's not a public meeting.
I would, however you want to structure it. I mean, however you as a board, send a subcommittee or whatever. I have a sense that Pinkerton would not be offering a public tour of their facility at this particular time. So the idea is that you as a board, as we're doing informal investigations, would have an I don't want to mislead anybody, that they're not going to be prepared to accept whatever. My initial contact when I negotiated the Auburn contract was we went with something. But and the rest of the board didn't get to see.
I would recommend that if we're gonna have a quorum, we institute a meeting here and continue it, so the public will be here. I don't know if they can accommodate them, but I don't see how we can be at a quorum discussing school issues, not allow the public to be there, and not be in non-public. And it doesn't qualify for non-public, and it doesn't, so I think if we continue the meeting at that location, which we've done that, I think, we'll have to look at, I've seen other boards go look at the kitchen or something, and you leave from this room and you go somewhere else. Part of the reason I'm saying this is, I think we have to step very carefully here, because we have a contract with Manchester. We are exploring. But if Manchester wants to come and say sour grapes, or you guys are doing stuff you shouldn't be doing, we need to be able to say no. We are doing everything exactly by the book, right down to whether we had a meeting or whether we didn't, because I think we could be accused of trying to violate our contract or, you know, do things we're not supposed to. And I don't think we are doing things we're not supposed to, but I think we need to make sure we cross every T when we do it. So I think maybe if we convene a meeting here, if there's not a quorum, there's only two, I guess it doesn't matter. But
What defines a non-meeting? We've had non-meetings. How does that work?
Well, I think you have non-meetings to control the council.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a chance social meeting.
we can't afford to bring the word.
No.
But in our school board rules, I think it has something about if we want to go in as a tour. I don't know where it is now, but I've read it. But like if we wanted to go into Manchester, we would go through the superintendent. We wouldn't invite the public to come with us to a tour in Manchester. And this is possible public school. I think at the Heck School, did public attend that, or?
That was a
public meeting,
yeah,
so
that
they
was-
could have. But, you know, this, I think, is a tour, thing, but in to get information. I don't know. I don't think it's.
Well, the other thing I would offer,
It's not a
Mike-
public meeting if we don't do any deliberating. But I think we need to read the school board meeting, the policies, because I know I saw something in there about that. And we are allowed to do that sort of thing.
But it won't really matter what the policy says, because the
No.
law says,
Well, the law.
so we could have a policy that said we could, but if the law says we can, and normally, I think if we're all going up to head school or something, nobody would care. It was a legal meeting, I understand that, but in this situation, with the climate that's maybe developing, I think we've got to be sure that we are not doing something we shouldn't be doing.
By attending the tour of Pinkerton, we could be exploring our options for our notification to the Manchester School District that we would like to opt out on June 30th of 2016, and we would not be premature if we began to look at schools now.
I completely agree.
It's easy enough to, I mean, we're not scheduling it for this week, right? I mean, it's easy enough to look up the New
yeah.
Hampshire law and the
Oh,
administrative rules. There's only about 7 that apply to school board members. And again, I remember reading them, but I have to look again and see.
I think the only way we do it without having a meeting is that we actually, none of us discuss any of the things we consider. Because
At that
anything,
time.
yeah, anything other than that, with us in a called place, at a quorum, then that's it. I mean, that's my understanding. There's not a lot of wiggle room there.
Well, I know most of us can agree not to speak during the thing, but I
We
don't
can
know about
ask-
all of us.
we can
Well, if
ask-
we had the meeting, then we could
Oh.
discuss things, because I think we'd want
Yeah,
to.
I
Just to
don't-
clarify, we can ask questions of,
Right, we couldn't comment.
Right, to each other.
exactly.
And I think it should be like that without public, but that's me.
I'm only bringing it up.
No, I,
One vote, so.
that's a valid point, valid point. Can we investigate that?
Okay, sure what I'm investigating. You want me to ask Gordon that we want to do a tour of Pinkerton and,
Can we go as a board and have it not be a public meeting?
yeah.
Not
Yes.
discuss anything and just.
Let's go as a board, have not a public meeting, is that sufficient? We'll post it, if it needs to be posted, let's post
Well,
it.
I think we can go as a public meeting. I think the only kink in the armor here, and I'm not faulting Pinkerton, but if they're not willing to accept members of the public, and we have members of the public that show up, we're in a pickle, because members of the public have the right to come to our public meeting.
I think we need to state that, I don't know.
Well,
I
if we
don't
can't
know-
have a
I don't
public
know-
meeting,
I don't know if we can.
That's where the twist is, I think.
Are we okay with?
Yeah,
I'd like, yeah, we
Investigation
should look
then?
at it.
The problem that we have is they are not subject. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
it's.
so we'll have, can you check on that?
And generally, I'm not a spokesman for Pinkerton, they don't open what they do. So, my sole intent of trying to do this is I am working on my informal discussions, not the only ones I've spoken to. But they're informal discussions. So some of it needs to remain confidential because it does compromise our position.
But then we run the risk that, are you saying that we're gonna hear things there that are not public? Then we can't have a public meeting. I really am in favor of the assessment committee, I'll tell you.
Well,
I think it's cleaner.
and if I could, I'm not because they have no authority. The purpose, and it's just my idea, if it doesn't work and it's too complicated, we don't have to do it. My purpose is, it begins the process of negotiations. I'm not saying we're committing to Pinkerton. It does begin a negotiations process. And you do not negotiate a relationship like that, a business relationship in public. So, however you're wrestling with it, I've been through it before, and it wasn't an issue with the other SAU school district. But it's up to you. It may
But how
be
do
so complicated that you don't want to do the tour.
How do you post it? How did you post it?
I forget, I think we said the Auburn School Board of the tour, I think
It wasn't a subcommittee? No, it was a subcommittee.
we went on several occasions. The first visit, we went on several occasions. And so,
Yeah, I can't see anything wrong with getting information, going there to get
Agreed.
information, not to discuss or deliberate, get information as a board, and not just with Pinkerton. If the other schools want to invite us for a tour, I mean, to go get information, I can't see any problem with it at all.
I guess my issue is that we all voted to do the assessment committee, and I thought that that's what their purpose would be, is to go out there and do the initial look over and gather all the information, kind of bring it back here, and us to kind of look at it. So, and all, that doesn't pose any of these problems, and that also would include member of the administration, the public, that cross-section that we asked for. I don't know, I mean, if we do this now, then do we send the assessment committee down to look at it after? I thought that was the process that we put forth, and I'd rather wait and do that. And the other thing is, I don't think it stops Phil from having confidential talks with those people. I mean,
well,
on his own. I mean, does us walking through the building make a difference?
It was my understanding the assessment committee was to assess our current high schools.
Well, no, it says to look at all the high
All the high
schools that
schools.
our students were listed for, that were
Students-
available, basically, was the criteria. So,
Okay, but students attend.
and Manchester and Central were
Yeah,
included, yes.
okay, all right, yeah. Tricia?
It is my understanding that, in our contract, if we notify Manchester that they are in a material breach of our contract, and the Department of Education says they are in a material breach, they have 180 days to correct it, and depending on when we notify them, in the fall of 2013, we could be high school homeless. So I don't think that it is not prudent for us to go look at another school, nor do we jeopardize. The assessment committee is assessing what's going on where we go. The school board is being asked we made a motion and it was approved unanimously for Dr. Littlefield to have informal discussions with other schools, and he is coming back and saying they are offering you a tour. If we don't accept, they're not going to take us seriously if we become high school homeless in the fall of 2013.
I want to be careful that we don't start negotiating against ourselves. Public forum, not that this is secret information, but I don't want to be broadcasting to people who currently have a contract what alternatives we're looking at. Just doesn't make any business sense. It's too early in the process. My memory serves me, when the board was considering the assessment committee, I believe that I contacted the board and said, the sooner you can get that in place, the better. Because as I'm doing my informal talks, the data they collect will be very important to all of us. So I probably need a little clarification, and maybe we all do, on what the role of the assessment committee is. I see them gathering data, and I think we listed it was accreditation data, school approval data, and so forth. I was never under the impression that they would have any status to be visiting alternatives to our current situation and having any kind of dialogue with them. That's really a board thing. I would be very careful about delegating that. Otherwise, we're sort of working at cross purposes. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail because I don't think we should at this particular point in time. But I have contacted everybody that was on that list. I have various forms of feedback from each one. That right now needs to remain confidential. And at some point in time, I need a mechanism where I can bring that to the board.
Well, I think we may be talking about two things, because I thought the assessment committee was, so we would gather data so that if something were to develop, we would have a better understanding. We also have the reassignment issue and knowing which schools that we're likely, or now the superintendent is likely to assign other students to and what they have to offer. I didn't see this as just a effort to go out and necessarily, start negotiations or anything like that. I thought it was to gather information and bring it back to us. So I don't see any problem with Dr. Littlefield talking to everybody. But at the same time, I think, at this point, should we rethink this assessment committee? I mean, if we're not, I hate to encourage people to come on it if we're going to step up and do the work and go out and there's really nothing left for them to do. I don't think that makes sense.
I look at it as we directed the superintendent to have these informal discussions, and we received an invitation. I don't think we're taking anything away from the assessment committee. I'm all for the assessment committee because they're going to have a lot of work to do. It's not just going to be a tour for them. It's going to be a part of it, absolutely. But this just allows us, the way I look at it anyways, I'm listening to information from the assessment committee, and I've seen this facility and can
Well,
visualize it.
I'm not comfortable going on the tour with a quorum unless we make it a public meeting and the public can come along. I don't want to put myself in that position, and I don't think there's likely anything to happen, but I think this is a very tense situation. I don't want to stretch it. I mean, if the assessment committee went down there and looked around, there's nothing wrong. They could go anywhere they're invited. But for us to do it as a board, I think there's some issues. I'm personally, unless it's absolutely by the book, I don't want to be one of the members that goes. As much as I'm looking forward to the tour, or maybe we break the tour up into multiple tours or different times or something, but I don't want to risk the quorum questions. Thank you.
I think we just form the subcommittee, and this way we have, we respond to their invitation, and so they know we're serious, and that negates any situations with it being a public meeting.
Two person. Yeah, three we have
Wait, when is our next meeting? We have a meeting scheduled?
August is the next scheduled meeting unless we have.
Is it July 11th?
It's, yeah, I think you said you're available on the 11th,
I'm available for the wedding.
and you agreed that, you were okay with it. So yeah, it's the 11th.
So we'll go with the 11th.
Dr. Brennan, it's July 11th.
Are we gonna
So-
make that a regular meeting?
Well,
Or
it's
just
a
meeting?
posted meeting. I think we'll have the standard business items, but it'll be a shortened agenda,
It's right now, it's single item.
single item.
So couldn't we get the assessment committee in place that night? If we had close it on the 30th, we could appoint and approve on the 11th, and then have them go and tour the facility, and then we're off the hook. Because I'm just a little concerned as being one that brought the assessment committee forward and now trying to encourage people to join, that if the very first action that's going to be taking place, the school board's going to step in, form a subcommittee and go. And to me, it just makes it seem as though they're really, the first task has been done for them. That's the reality.
How is the invitation?
Well, I've been having informal. We all get feedback from the public, including me. In fact, I do it every day, in fact, parents. And what I'm hearing as a theme is some great concern that the long-standing and positive relationship this community has had with Manchester is in jeopardy because of funding issues. And that the public is concerned not about September of 2012, but what does it look like in 2012? And then what else do they lose in 2013? And then what else do they lose in 2014? The majority of questions that I get are not from parents who have kids at Colley and they're worried about where they're going to go. They're from parents who have kids at Underhill. And I thought that the board shared that same concern that I had about the long term and wanted me to informally start talking to other people about, would you be interested in Hookston? Could you take some of our kids? Could you take all of our kids? that kind of discussion is a confidential discussion. And I have been collecting information, so one of the places I go to was Pinkerton, not the only place. And before I have any further conversation, I thought it might be a good idea for those people who are not familiar with the campus, school board members, to see. Now, I know, once again, since we've been through a major change in order, that certainly passed community muster. Both the parent community and the community at large. That it's a process and not an event. And the initial investigation was myself and Pinkerton, expanded to subcommittee and Pinkerton, expanded to full board and Pinkerton, expanded to a series of community presentations by Pinkerton to the general public, as well as the parent public, about what they had to offer and so forth, followed by a school board forum, community forum, and then followed by the decision to actually make that change, so that people had information and people had data. There's really no use in my having informal discussions with anybody if I'm not going to do anything with it. My understanding, and again, I say this to you all the time, my job is to implement the policies and decisions that you as a board come up with. I might be confused on this. I didn't see the committee that's been formed as having that role. I saw that as a data collection committee, so that we'd have a set of data. You know, I saw their final product, like the high school study committee. You know, they had a charge, they did it, they finished, and they reported to the board. They didn't make a decision on whether we're going to build a high school, but they gave you numbers. I thought when the group was done, that you as a board and myself as contacting those informal districts would have a column like there would be SAT schools, accreditation, school approval, longitudinal data on college acceptances, who finishes college, so that you'd have like a matrix to compare hard data from one district to another. I thought that was the charge. I certainly don't want to be doing cross purposes, like I'm doing one thing, but you have an expectation that this group is going to do something else. But I think you just need, as a board, as 5 people, to clarify what we're expecting of both, and I'll behave accordingly. But I don't want to be contacting people and asking those questions about, are you interested in us, what will you take, and so forth. And you're sort of like wasting their time.
It was my interpretation when I was involved in both votes, was that we were directing the superintendent to have informal discussions with other people to see who could take some, all, none, and that the assessment committee was assessing where our current students went and what their structure was. It wasn't my understanding that the assessment committee was going to visit initially all of these places. It might, with an initial report, we might determine, well, we'd like to look a little more at that, but that would come back and be a board decision, that they would go and look at other schools. when the original high school study committee was set up and we were collecting data, when we thought, well, we might need to go look at some of these schools, we came back to the school board and said, as this study committee, can we go and look at some of these schools we're looking at? We didn't just go contact a school board. And maybe other board members can speak to when they voted, how they voted, what their interpretation was, and that might give us clarification.
I just want to know if we could just put this on the agenda for the 11th meeting, because I know that I can address some of the concerns. Well, I won't be there, but I can address them ahead of time. Some of the concerns about the legality of this. I think we should get as much information as possible. I think the informal talks by the superintendent, our visitation, the assessment committee data, I think all of those should be used, and as much as possible, and from all the districts. And so I just think if I can show the legality of it, I'm sure, if we have more time.
What I'm having a hard time getting my hands around here is that 6 months ago, this board was publicly making statements that we were in danger of violating our contract with Manchester if we didn't put hardship in JCB, all of these concerns. They were in the paper, everything. Now, tonight, again, we turned down a more unrestricted JCB that would allow this board to send people where we wanted to. But on the other hand, we're going to go to a school and talk to them about taking our kids when we're in a contract with Manchester, and nobody seems to be concerned about the contract. I'm all for it. I'm all for doing this. But what I don't understand is, when we were acting within the letter of our contract, members of this board publicly said that we were, in fact, going to violate that contract, and we better do nothing. That's why I thought an assessment committee made up of a cross-section of people to start looking at this stuff, and if Phil wanted to have informal conversations. One of the other problems we have is that Phil's confidential information can't really be shared with us, because my understanding is we can't go into a non-public meeting to talk about these things, because I don't see where they fit up with one of the criteria to be in non-public.
Negotiations.
But it's not negotiations. I don't think we want to say that it's negotiations at this point. So I'm all for the tour, but I just don't think, I'm having a hard time understanding some of the people on this board when we're so worried about violating the contract one moment, 6 months ago, and today, when I bring up being careful, it's like, nah, it's not a problem.
If we have an opt-out date, which we do,
June 30th, 2016.
we have every right to prepare for it. Now, if we prepare 3.5 years in advance, 4 years in advance, nobody can call that any kind of a breach. We're not breaching anything. We're preparing for a time when we have an option, and that's that's all we were. Actually, Carol, did you have a hand up?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I think my intention is that we're preparing for whether we want to opt out at our opt-out date. And I think the sooner we start that process, the better, so that we're not faced with the same situation we had an opt-out date before. And to my knowledge, nobody ever started investigating whether we really wanted to leave or not.
I'm in total agreement. What I don't understand is the statements from this board about violating the contract when we were executing our contract, the vote tonight to restrict our ability to send some kids to other schools. It seems inconsistent to me that now we're going to go down there as a quorum board and discuss with officials from another school our options of breaking our contract with Manchester. And
we're going down and ask questions.
yeah, no. And Dan, you were the one that when I was arguing with you about the fact that we were not violating our contract under JCB prior to hardship, you were the one saying, oh, we've got to fix this, we're violating our contract. That wasn't true. And now we're willing to go and have a school board meeting down there.
I don't think
It's
we're talking-
inconsistent,
We're not
that's all.
talking apples and apples.
We never are, Dana, we never are. Thank you.
Tricia? did.
When so if 4 of us would like to attend a meeting that has been extended to us by another school, and Mr. Pearl feels that he's conflicted personally with the decision to do or not do, he can opt out of, like, we can say, yes, we'd like to go, and can Kathy set up a meeting wizard? We think afternoons would work best in everyone's other work schedules. And if Mr. Pearl feels conflicted by it, isn't sure of the legality of it, we can say explore the date while Dr. Littlefield looks into Gordon, what we call it, how we post it, what we say to it, and Fred does his, but we are at least going back to this invitation and saying, we're working out a date when would work good for you, like on their part. I mean, it is summer, maybe Pinkerton leaves at 1 o'clock. Like, I don't know. Like, on Fridays, administrators aren't in the school all the time. So maybe Friday will never work at Pinkerton during the summer. Like,
But it's not just Mr. Pearl. I don't want to do anything illegal or against the administrative rules either. I'm just saying I'm sure I can show those rules if we just wait on this. I'm sure I could show that it's legal. I just have to research that, or however we got to do it so that it is legal. Whether it's a subcommittee, whether it's counted as non-deliberative, or whatever. I know I can show that if we just wait a little bit and bring this up at the next meeting.
You have something you wanted to say?
No, I wanted to apologize for asking you to go on a tour.
And that's all it was. It was an offer. So
I need to assure the board, as a board, that I am keenly aware of what the Manchester contract says. I think there are nights that I dream about it. I know pretty much how to do my job. I'm not perfect. And as I'm approaching other districts, I know what the conversation is. And I can assure you with 100% certainty that engaging in dialogue about what your options are for June 30th, 2016 is not a violation of the contract. Engaging in dialogue, and it's such a good boy, engaging in dialogue about what you're going to do if, in fact, the budget crisis is so severe that they're in breach of contract, is something you gotta start talking about. And you talk about that by going into non-public and talking about it. And I can assure you, you can talk about it. You're not required in public session a video that we can send to Manchester to say, here are the strategies that the Books of Board is going to use to hold you accountable to the contract. That is, I'm concerned. That's a dialogue you have to have. And I don't want to get into, for instances, of hypotheticals because it creates something else. But I'm losing sleep over your high school students. And I will follow your lead and do whatever the will of the board is. But I gotta get going. because you don't have many options. And I know that because I've had informal conversations with a number of school districts. You don't have any options.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, Phil, I'd like to take exception with your statement that you know the contract inside and out. We've had this discussion before. But on November 4th at the school board meeting, you made a statement that the high school contract in Manchester required hardship. And I asked you to change that statement, and you would not change that statement. So to sit here and say that, you know, and bring that up as a point that you know that, I still ask you, why have we misrepresented to the public that the high school contract with Manchester requires hardship? This board could be sending students now to other high schools for the actions of this board. That's very clear. So I think we formed an assessment committee. We did that with a plan, and I think we should follow that plan. Or we might as well get rid of the assessment committee.
Tricia?
Could I make a recommendation that we continue moving on the agenda that we have, and then when we get to non-public session, if our superintendent thinks we have contractual things to discuss, that we go into non-public? Or do we need a motion that we accept the invitation to Pinkerton? I'm asking
I
the chair
was
for
bringing up some
clarification.
information on items.
But I'm asking the clerk.
We can take action if you like. This could just be a discussion.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this invitation until our July 11th meeting.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor of approving the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So we've got the July 11th meeting with Dr. Brennan,
Yeah.
and we'll see what we get for information. All right.
I don't understand how we can, at the July 11th meeting, have Dr. Brennan here, have him leave, and then we're gonna discuss having an invitation to Pinkerton. We've changed meetings around so that prospective employees don't come when he's gonna be here. I don't understand.
If we're not doing anything wrong, and that's what Phil said, then there's no problem if Dr. Brennan's in the room and we discuss our tour to Pinkerton. If it's a public meeting, it's either confidential or it's not.
There's professional courtesy to the man. Dr. Brennan has a job to do. He's not in favor of many of the things that are happening. He's controlled by the Manchester Board of Mayor and Aldermen. I mean, that's a classic problem in Manchester that has been going on for 25 years. The superintendent's hands are tied behind his back, depending on who the mayor is.
My assumption is that the superintendent will give his report, will ask questions, he'll answer as best he can, and then he'll be on his way, and we'll proceed with the meeting.
Yeah, and I think he'd think worse of us if we're not preparing for the future of 2016 or whenever we opt out, if we ever decide to opt out of Manchester. I mean, he would expect us, I would think, to prepare for the future, and that might even help. Maybe he can offer some kind of advice or things about Manchester for us. I mean, I don't see what the competition will hurt for at the end of the contract.
And Mike stated he's pretty confident he can provide us with some information, so, you know, that's why I voted in favor.